3 withdrawals, 2 wire transfers, 1 new car in his driveway. My father hadn't been dead 2 weeks, and my brother had already moved almost $60,000 out of an account he wasn't supposed to touch. He thought grief would make me too slow to notice. He was wrong. By the time the will was read, I'd already been sitting across from a lawyer for 11 days. This is what happened when he found out. I was 14 the first time I understood what my brother was to this family. Marcus was 22, and I found him and Dad in the kitchen after midnight, Dad writing a check at the counter with his back to the doorway, like he didn't want anyone to see the number. $3,000, just to get back on his feet after Marcus lost the apartment he'd stopped paying rent on months earlier. Marcus didn't say thank you. He said, "See, I told you it wasn't a big deal," like Dad had been the unreasonable one for worrying. That kitchen became a pattern I could set a clock to. A car repair that turned into a car replacement. A temporary loan for a business that closed within a year, with Dad's name still on the paperwork long after Marcus had walked away from it. By the time Dad hit his 60s, there was a rule in our family nobody ever said out loud. Don't leave anything where Marcus can reach it easily. Dad got sick in the spring. Pancreatic cancer, the kind that doesn't leave much time to prepare, and even less time to think clearly about paperwork while you're watching your father disappear in front of you. I flew in every other weekend. Marcus visited twice, but it was Marcus who offered, loudly, at Sunday dinner, in front of everyone, to help Dad get his finances in order, since I'm closer and I have more time. Nobody objected. I should have. For a while, it looked fine. Marcus set up online access to Dad's accounts for convenience. He started picking up Dad's mail. When I asked Dad about it directly, in one of his clearer moments near the end, he just said, "Marcus is handling it," in the tired voice of a man who didn't have the energy left to handle it himself. I didn't know yet how literally that would turn out to be true. Dad passed on a Tuesday morning in October. I flew in that same day. Marcus met me at the airport, and on the drive back to the house, he mentioned, almost in passing, the way you'd mention picking up groceries, that he'd already started sorting out some of Dad's accounts so we're not dealing with a mess later. I didn't think much of it that first night. Grief does strange things to how carefully you listen. It was Dad's neighbor, Eleanor, who said something odd at the funeral reception. She mentioned seeing a car, a nice one, silver, brand new, parked in Dad's driveway the week before he died, and joked that she hadn't realized Dad was buying himself a retirement gift. Dad hadn't bought a car in 11 years. By the end, he could barely walk to the mailbox. That night, I asked Marcus about it directly. He laughed it off. Said it was a loaner from a friend. Nothing to do with Dad's money. I let it go. Publicly. The next morning, I sat alone at Dad's kitchen table with my laptop and pulled up the online banking login Marcus didn't know I still had access to from years earlier, back when Dad first set it up and asked me to help him understand it. I told myself I was just going to check the balance. Confirm there was nothing to confirm. The first number that stopped me was a $22,000 withdrawal, made in person, 9 days before Dad died, at a branch 2 towns from where Dad lived. A branch Marcus used regularly and Dad never had. I read the line 3 times before it fully landed. Then a $19,000 wire transfer 4 days later, sent to an account under Marcus's name. I remember my hand was still on the mouse, not moving, for what felt like a full minute. Then I found the car. A cashier's check, $31,000, dated 6 days before Dad's death, drawn from an account that had listed Marcus as a newly added authorized user just 3 weeks earlier. I did the math without wanting to. Dad had been unconscious more than half of the days between that authorization and his death. I closed the laptop. I didn't confront Marcus. Instead, I found Dad's estate attorney, the one who'd handled his original will 15 years earlier, and made an appointment. I told him everything I'd found. He asked me one question that changed the next 11 days entirely. Did your father ever update this will? Because there's a sealed amendment in this file, dated about 6 weeks before he died, and it's never been opened. The reading was scheduled for the following Saturday, in the same conference room where Dad had signed his original will years earlier. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, in a suit I hadn't seen before, sitting with the kind of calm that comes from a man who's already spent the money in his head. He made small talk with our aunt about getting the estate settled quickly since Dad would have wanted things simple. He mentioned, almost too casually, that he'd already put a deposit down on a place upstate. A place, he said, that would be perfect once everything clears. I sat across from him and said nothing. I'd spent 11 days building a case I hadn't told a single family member about, not even my husband in full detail, because I needed Marcus to walk into that room believing exactly what he'd believed for the last 3 weeks, that he'd gotten away with it. The attorney came in carrying 2 folders. One was thin, the original will everyone expected. The other was thicker, with a single word typed on the tab. Amendments. The attorney opened with the original will first, the one Marcus was clearly expecting. A fairly even split between the two of us, drafted years ago when things between Dad and Marcus were simpler. Marcus's shoulders relaxed slightly. I watched him do the math in his head. Then the attorney opened the second folder. 6 weeks before he passed, the attorney said, your father came to my office alone. He asked to formally amend the will, and he asked me to hold it sealed until his passing. He turned the folder so the table could see it. Every account previously held jointly or with authorized user access has been restructured. Every asset has been retitled into a trust. Marcus's smile hadn't fully disappeared yet. He was still waiting for the part where this didn't apply to him. The trust, the attorney continued, names a sole executor responsible for identifying and recovering any assets removed from the estate without authorization prior to death. He looked up. That executor is you, he said, looking directly at me. The room went still. Marcus's mouth opened slightly, like he was about to say something reasonable, and found there wasn't anything reasonable left to say. There's one more note, the attorney said, almost gently now. Your father wrote a short statement, dated the same day. He asked me to read it aloud if this situation ever became necessary. He glanced at Marcus. He wrote, if you're hearing this, Marcus, it means you did exactly what I was afraid you'd do. I love you, but I'm not surprised, and neither is your sister. Marcus didn't move for almost a full minute. Our aunt's hand went to her mouth. My husband, sitting beside me, reached for my hand under the table. Steady, not surprised, like he'd been quietly bracing for this moment right alongside me. Marcus finally spoke. He wasn't in his right mind when he wrote this. The attorney slid a second document across the table. Your father passed a full cognitive competency evaluation 4 days before this amendment was signed, at my recommendation, specifically so it couldn't be challenged on those grounds. He paused. He knew exactly what he was doing. I didn't say anything yet. I let the silence in that room do exactly what 11 days of quiet preparation had built it to do. The weeks after the reading weren't clean or satisfying the way I'd imagined, sitting alone in the attorney's office days earlier. Being named executor didn't feel like winning. It felt like being handed the coldest, most exhausting job in the family, at the exact moment I was still trying to grieve my father. I gave Marcus 30 days to return what he could. He returned about half. The car, sold at a loss, and roughly $14,000 in cash. The rest would need to go through formal estate recovery. Months of paperwork, and eventually a small claims filing. Marcus never showed up to contest. We didn't speak for almost 4 months. When we finally did, it wasn't at a holiday, and it wasn't warm. It was a short phone call where he said he was sorry, in the flat, unconvincing way people apologize when they're sorry about getting caught, more than sorry about what they did. I told him I believed he meant it, because some days I did, and other days I said it just so the call could end. I think about that reading a lot, not the reveal itself, but the 11 days before it, sitting across from Marcus at the funeral reception, letting him talk about settling things simply, knowing what I knew. I don't regret staying quiet that long. My father spent his last clear weeks protecting an inheritance from the son he loved, instead of just talking to him one more time about it. I don't know if that was cowardice or mercy. If you knew someone in your family would do this the moment you were gone, would you confront them while you still had the chance? Or would you do what my father did and let the paperwork say what you couldn't?